Hey, it's Tarrmu and welcome to Thinking Out Loud, and in today's video we'll be talking about video game remakes and, more importantly, in my eyes, what makes a good remake. There has been recently a huge trend that has moved towards remaking and reimagining many classic games, particularly from the late 90s and early 2000s era of video games. Whether we are talking about Silent Hill, Final Fantasy, or Resident Evil, there has been tons of games that have received a remake over the years, and there are differing opinions on what makes a good remake, and are remakes really even a new game in a way, or are they just a rehash? So I would like to discuss today what I feel makes a good remake. The first big thing that I'd like to get into is understanding the difference between a remaster and a remake. A remaster is generally an uplifted version of a pre-existing game with some minor enhancements. Things like HD resolutions, improved frame rates, quality of life features that will make the game more accessible or refined for the time of its re-release. Like quality of life features overall, things that make the game feel more enhanced but don't from the ground up reshape the game. However, a remake entails a top to bottom recreation of the original work, where the game is developed in a new engine and many of its fundamentals are often reworked, and some of the game's pacing or structure has shifted or been fine-tuned. Remakes walk a tight rope of serving a faithful reimagining of something that is beloved by its original audience, whilst needing to find a way to bring it to life in a modern way. Take the Final Fantasy VII remakes, for example, and how they have reimagined the turn-based combat of the original, for example, or how Resident Evil 4 Remake now has mechanics like parrying. There is no definitive checklist or definition for what exactly constitutes as a remake. I look at remakes like the amazing Dead Space remake of 2023, which in most departments was still the same game, with its major touch-ups being some traversal features, the zero-G sections of the game, and some tweaks to its narrative and making it a bit more fine-tuned. But overall, I do think that that game was reworked from the ground up and did restructure elements of the original experience. It didn't just enhance and repackage the original and make it upscaled or something. It was a new creation. But compared to something like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which reimagines traversal, story moments, adds new systems, and a whole new card game, there are really two ends of what I define as a remake that is good. I recently covered Persona 3 Reload a couple months ago on this channel, and I feel that the reimagined world of Persona 3 feels largely like the same original game, but with many nice new features, quality of life additions, and things that would welcome new players, particularly those who have played Persona 5. Now, that may be something that would dissuade the people who have played the original, and there is another issue, and it's like, what version do you play of a game, and when does the modern touch-ups go too far into straying away from what the original was? It is my belief that in many respects, the core tenets of a good remake are ones where you can feel or see the world reimagined in a way that feels different stylistically, not purely in terms of fidelity. It is one that, whilst it may have a change to aspects of its gameplay loop, feels logical, and it feels like it overall still preserves much of what made the game feel like the game it was when it originally released. I think if you were to re-release Silent Hill 2, but you were to remove the fog, which was there as a limitation in the original days, and remove that from Silent Hill 2, then it would be a drastically lesser game, because that was a big component that contributed to that game's atmosphere. Whilst it is my belief that it is primarily the atmosphere and how the process of recapturing and reimagining something is what makes a remake truly special, others may look and see a remake as an opportunity to retell an existing story with the same story, scenarios, set pieces, and gameplay formula at its core, and just want a new coat of paint to make that game feel and look modern. This is where I feel the discourse around games, again like Final Fantasy VII Remake, come into question, because whilst they are still ultimately telling the story of 7, albeit with creative liberties, they do deviate off the path here, and it is a recreation. It's not a one-to-one recreation of the original, but it still does in many ways faithfully recapture elements and what made that original game. The journey in many ways, in most ways, is still the same, just told in a different variation. And I know that a lot of people get angry at this with a lot of remakes when they do either cut things or take creative liberties in retelling things, but I think that this is fantastic because I think that this means that they are two separate experiences. You want Final Fantasy VII, that original game is still there and still worth playing. You want the remakes, they're there in all their glory and they still do tell the same fantastic story differently, yes, but it's still there. And I would say the same thing about Resident Evil 4, and I would say the same thing about Silent Hill 2. There is so much there with these remake games that I think that it's interesting, and I think that they ultimately, this is where the big separator is. There is the original and the remake. They ultimately try to invoke the similar sense of feeling, and I think that that is the big word to take away, is the feeling, connection, and emotion. These games are there to onboard new people and capture that magic and get them hooked and engrossed in these worlds the same way that the people who originally played it back in the day would have. I think the biggest two things that you want from a remake is not just nostalgia. You don't want nostalgia. You want that feeling to be recaptured, that memory to be re-established. You want that sense of feeling and immersion that you got when you originally played that game. You don't want it to be just a walk down memory lane, but you want it to be reimagined. You want it to be that thing that you remember it being nostalgically, but you know, the graphics, the everything being just perfect the way it was back in the day, touched up in a way where it's new, modern, and fresh. You want it to feel that way, and I think that remakes, they walk that tightrope of giving you that feeling, and they're not going to give it to you by just one-to-one copying what was and what has come before, but more through taking liberties to do something new whilst encapsulating the sense of feeling, atmosphere, and immersion that defined those games back when they originally released, and try to capture that mood and overall feeling that can make you love these characters and these worlds all over again. They can tweak these characters, expand upon their personality, change up gameplay mechanics, and reinvent aspects of the game's progression, but at the core, if that essence and that feeling of walking down those streets of Silent Hill or exploring the world of Gaia in Final Fantasy really do make you have a throwback moment to when that original game released, then I think ultimately it is a job well done. Like I said in the early part of this video, there is no clear-cut way to really just say, what makes a remake good? How is this done? And this is ultimately just my subjective opinion, but it is one thing that I feel has repeatedly been encapsulated in remakes that I have enjoyed and resonated with, and I think that many fans have similar feelings, and it is those core tenets that I've mentioned. But hey, it's just my thoughts and feelings, and I would love to know in the comments down below, what do you think makes a good remake? What are the core pillars that define a good remake for you? And what would you like to see in future remakes? As always, I am Tarrmu, and this has been Thinking Out Loud, and I will see you in the next video. I have a few in the works right now, and they should be out to you shortly. So I hope you enjoyed those, and I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did like this video, consider subscribing to the channel, and take care of yourself. Have a good one.